First, let me just say, the title to this video is not clickbait. This really happened. I will prove it to you. This is sort of my first political video, and yeah, I've never ever done anything political on this channel, and it's sort of, I don't know, I guess that's just not really what I wanted to do. We have different interests, and so this channel was more for my, mechanical interests and that sort of thing, but I'm an old man now. I'm 27 years old. I'm absolutely ancient, so I yell about politics. I guess this is what we've devolved to. Anyway, so let me go to fucking stage right here. So first, I published my article on October 9th, 2025. I made my Medium account because I wanted to tell Jeff Bezos' ex-wife basically that she was wrong, that there's more that she could do. She was taking a much less effective approach, and I believe I hinted in the original article that it was about ego. I certainly leaned into that a little bit more in the second article, but I sort of hoped, because Mackenzie Scott actually publishes articles on Medium, so my hope was sort of that, well, she publishes articles on Medium, I'll publish an article on Medium, I'll have sort of a clickbaity title, and maybe a picture of her face on the thumbnail, something like that, and maybe there's a chance that she'll see it and read it, and maybe there's an even smaller chance that I could persuade her of something. Anyway, I didn't realize this. I wasn't paying attention. Mackenzie Scott previously published an article on Medium December 14th, 2022, and obviously I published mine on October 9th. Well, October 15th, she publishes another article. So it's been about 3 years since she published an article. I published one about her, and then all of a sudden, 6 days later, I don't know, I'm probably the dumbest possible person to make this point to her, right? Surely there's somebody more articulate on the planet, but I have an imagination and free will, and I took a crack at it, and I succeeded in bothering her, at least. Yeah, let me show you the original article that I wrote. Mackenzie Scott has failed. That's sort of a, you want a clickbait title. And my intention, I'm sure it works both ways, right? But my intention was to grab her attention specifically. I wanted her to read my article, which I succeeded, I suppose, in doing. People should be saying positive things about her. Why am I saying something negative, basically? I don't know, it's a lot of thought goes into a single sentence, but when the sentence is not a banger, then you notice when the sentence is bad, but when the sentence is good, you don't really. Anyway, is Mackenzie Scott a good billionaire? Stories of her donations, generous terms, and very objective to eliminate her own wealth may make some among us feel happy inside, but missing from her ideology is the concept of change. Her purse alone cannot fund the gaping holes and inequalities rampant in America, and even if it could, she will, by her own admission, eventually run out of funds. America is an oligarchy. Money is power and speech. To voluntarily relinquish these immense tools is tantamount to throwing your hands in the air, begging for absolution from responsibility. She wants to fight systemic obstacles for minority students. How is she doing this? Funding their education? But federally mandated tuition-free state college would do the same thing, not just for minorities. Still not enough. Mandate colleges admit a representative percentage of students based on the race of applicants, say. Not only have you solved the very issues Ms. Scott has attempted to solve, but you've done it at a far greater scale. More students will benefit from these federal policies than ever could from her donations. Affordable housing? Quote, real estate investors bought 1/3 of all single-family residential homes sold in the second quarter of 2025, end quote. What has the greatest impact on housing affordability? Construction or hoarding by investors? I know that's a controversial issue. At what rate is Ms. Scott constructing homes? At what rate is Ms. Scott constructing homes by her donations to Habitat for Humanity? Can her donations outpace current investor demand to lower prices? I don't know why there's a comma there. That's weird. Did I just find an error in my article? Can she outpace future investor demand? Of course not. Government regulation on residential home ownership is mathematically the more effective approach. I could spend much more time giving you examples, but my approach to this article will be much the same as the approach I argue Ms. Scott could have had. Systemic. Charity fills holes left by failures of society. The biggest, longest term, most productive solution is to create a society which lacks these holes. A society that has need for charities is a society that has failed to protect its own people. David and Charles Koch are best known for their influence over Congress. They bought ad time in countless small races with low grassroots fundraising potential for candidates, which at the time made their preferred candidates near impossible to beat. When there was congressional gridlock during the Obama presidency, then Speaker of the House John Boehner met with who else but the Koch brothers to discuss possible solutions. Because, of course, the Kochs had such immense influence over so many representatives. Our more modern equivalent to this is AIPAC. Even candidates not directly bribed by AIPAC face immense challenges criticizing ongoing Israeli imperialism, or Zionism as AIPAC will provide immense funding to opponents to unseat them, and any member like them who dares to criticize the war crimes of the state of Israel. Yeah, so that should be any. Man, I'm going to have to fix that. Boy, did we find 2 errors? Hang on a second. Can I edit this? I don't know why that comma's there. That's weird. 8 and Y. This is why you never proofread things before you post them on the internet, because you would never make a mistake, obviously. To really change the world, to create a more moral and just society for generations, Ms. Scott would have to focus her energy and resources, basically, to bribe and influence the representatives in the United States federal government. A Harvard study found a near-zero correlation between public opinion and public policy. Oh, is this objectionable? Distasteful? Perhaps she could use the political influence of her wealth to make bribery and corruption harder, perhaps by helping push through legislation to reverse Citizens United and other related decisions which have led to our current state of rampant corruption. The executive might veto it, override the veto, pass an amendment to the Constitution, bribe the president, perhaps give him some sort of golden airplane or presidential library donation. The Koch brothers were never deterred by the idea that something was difficult. What conservative ever is? They will stop at nothing to reshape the judicial branch in their own image, in the case of Mitch McConnell, for example. Why hasn't Ms. Scott done this already? Perhaps this is more speculative, but I get the impression her worldview is more whimsical. That'll be important later. The charitable endeavors she currently undertakes make her feel good in the same way they make reactionaries feel good when they read about them. It is probably about ego. She wants to be perceived as moral, and she probably works backwards from that framing rather than forwards from the framing of how to fix the world. Man, actually, I haven't read this since I posted it. These are rather salient because obviously she responded to me, so with the power of hindsight, that's not too far off. She only wants to fix the world if she can fix her perceived objection to her own finances at the same time, right? The goal is to get rid of her own money, not... I mean, she wants to help, but she wants to... Yeah, she is not selfless. No, selflessness would involve the slimy sphere of politics, changing the trajectory of the massive government institution which determines so much the outline of our society. That'll also be important later. Miss Scott probably does not want to get her hands dirty, just as Warren Buffett is determined to wait until he's already dead before he even considers what another person might possibly do with his wealth. Perhaps the Gates Foundation will someday have the resources to keep even more vaccines privately owned than just the COVID vaccine. Perhaps Buffett's immutable legacy will be keeping pharmaceutical companies more profitable than ever before as more and more people suffer and die from increased scarcity of vaccine and drug treatment. The answer to the question is that Miss Scott is approximately as good as any billionaire so far has been, negligibly. And then we'll boink, save my edits there, typos. Clink, and this is the article that she wrote 6 days later. Yeah, and I did not read it until, just about now, just before I cranked out my response article. I that's the thing. I suppose I imagined, like, number one, she's never going to read my art. I mean, realistically. And number two, even if she did read my article, like, what's she going to... She's going to write her own article in response? I never would have imagined that, right? I did notice she hadn't published an article since 2022. And I guess I just figured that, like, she wasn't on this website much or anything, but no, she's quiet. She probably peruses Twitter. She probably peruses Medium occasionally. She just is quiet, doesn't say much. But I don't know, yeah, it wouldn't have made sense to me to check, because I wouldn't have expected her to write an article about me. Anyway, we are the ones we've been waiting for. Quote from something. This is going to be rough. Lately, I've been thinking about the murmurations of starlings. The direction of these flights of millions of birds is not determined by any single leader or delegation, but by the responses of each bird to the needs and movements of the birds around it. In this way, they are constantly creating their direction together, and no bird among them can know what shape it will take or where they will land. There is a prophecy written by Hopi elders in the year 2000. It encourages us to recognize and celebrate our role as active participants in the co-creation of our communities. It's easy to focus on the methods of civic participation that make news, and hard to imagine the importance of the things we do each day with our own minds and hearts. Who nurtured a child in the kitchen? Who was kind to a stranger in line at the grocery store? Who gave $50 to a local food shelter? These are not news stories, but all of it matters. When my next cycle of gifts is posted to my database online, the dollar total will likely be reported in the news, but any dollar amount is a vanishingly tiny fraction of the personal expressions of care being shared into the world this year. To use just 1 year in the United States as an example, the total donated to U.S. charities of all kinds in 2020 was $471 billion, nearly a third of it in increments of less than $5,000. By the way, I'm going to pause here. I sort of intended to respond to this in my next article. I really didn't. I don't know, it was getting long. I just felt that... but anyway, increments of less than $5,000. Okay, so 2 questions. Number 1, is the number of Americans with $5,000 disposable income that they're willing to give to a charity, is the number of Americans with that money available to them increasing or decreasing? Do you suppose? And number 2, if those $5,000 donations are not decreasing in quantity, then I suppose it leads us to the conclusion that it's people with, fairly substantial amounts of money that are just donating small amounts, and, you're sort of already the upper class, and you're just giving a small, just tax them, just fucking tax them. What's the point? What's the point of taxes? Why do people working, for hourly wages, why do they pay higher tax rates than, like, investors, right? What do you do as an investor? You sit on your butt and you click a bunch of buttons on a computer, and most of the time you make money, and sometimes you lose money, and then the government has to come and bail you out, right? I'm sorry, that's not a real job, right? That's the thing is, that's not to say that, the computer job isn't a real job, right? Journalism, that's totally a real job. That's, in a lot of cases, you write an article on the computer, you do research on the computer, that's a computer job, that's real, right? You could do, accounting for a small business, that's a real job. No, I'm just saying, hedge funds create very little value in the market. I'm sorry, and there's this thing with market signals, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, they're going to exist without hedge funds, right? The purpose of a hedge fund is to, for example, buy Denny's or buy whatever it is, Cracker Barrel, and then you cut costs, increase profits, right? You reduce the quality of ingredients, you lay off employees, you reduce the pay of employees, you reduce the benefits to employees, you cut items off the menu that are less popular, right? You make the whole thing worse, cheaper, and then you're like, yay, we turned a profit. Or you do the corporate raider strategy where you just, it's not worth it, and you sell off all the pieces and you kind of make a profit, cannibalizing it for the guts. That doesn't add value, right? All these capitalist arguments break apart when we consider the reality of the current capitalism under which we live. Anyway, I don't know, like, does that not bother, like, the people that say, oh, well, you shouldn't raise taxes on billionaires because they create jobs or whatever. Okay, first of all, that's not true. If you believe that, you're just delusional. You're not living in the same reality as the rest of us, because they don't. Actually, it's the opposite, right? You tax a billionaire, their sort of income decreases because they're paying these taxes. They have a greater incentive to do more business, because the more business you do, the more you can skim profit off of the top, right? Or I suppose cut costs. I mean, obviously that's the other thing. But that's the thing. If we're engaging with this argument at all in terms of job creation, right? Oh, here, I'm going to help you increase profits. Okay, well then I'm going to create less jobs because you're giving me what I want. What I want is profit. I don't want to create jobs. As a rich person, fuck you, I don't want to create jobs. I want profit. And so sometimes you have to create jobs in order to have surplus labor value to steal from. So the more laborers you have, the more you can steal the surplus value of their labor, right? So that, no, you give them tax breaks, you're giving them the profit that they want. That de-incentivizes them from creating jobs, actually. I mean, in reality, it's probably a wash, but no, you got to put the screws to them so that they're like, shit, we got to expand business. And yeah, sometimes that involves cutting wages, but again, if we're going to engage with the argument from its own, premise, from its own perspective, putting the screws to them is going to make them want to do more business. I digress. There was also $68 billion in reported financial support sent to family members living in other countries. And by the way, again, I didn't respond to that one in my article. What does that mean? Okay, so people in other countries are poor. Their family members here making enough money that they're working poor and they have a few bucks they can send overseas. Cumulatively, that's 68 billion. Well, maybe not overseas, because it could be, Mexico is not ocean. Anyway, what's the point of this, right? That people helping each other is good? Yeah, congratulations. $68 billion in reported financial support was sent to people living in other countries because those other countries have serious economic problems. We should fix the economic problems, not just in this country, but in other countries, so that it's not a requirement. Yeah, you can send money to your family if you want to. God bless. It shouldn't be necessary for the survival of your family. Those family members living overseas or living in other countries shouldn't be dependent on your aid because you make just enough money in America to be able to afford to send them $40 or whatever. Anyway, systemic. It just this whole thing is, it makes her feel good. Anyway, she wants to think about the positive things in the world because it makes her feel good. She doesn't want to think about all the problems in the world, but you have to think about the problems if you're going to solve them. Tens of billions in crowdfunding, $200 billion in volunteer labor at service organizations, and nearly $700 billion in wages for the paid employees who chose to take jobs delivering those services over jobs where they might have earned more. Over 70% of Americans reported giving both labor and money to people they know, and half reported doing the same for strangers. That's well over $1 trillion worth of individual humanitarian action that we don't read it online or hear about in the nightly news. I think I made this point in my subsequent article here, but okay, congratulations. There's $1 trillion worth of humanitarian aid. It's not working because people still can't afford rent, so it's not working. So, wow, congratulations for, look at all this we're doing. Oh, okay, so it's failing. I just, whimsical worldview, right? I said that'll be important later. What a whimsical fucking worldview. Just, you have to think about good things because you're so fragile that you'll collapse into a cloud of steam like the Wicked Witch of the West if you think about negativity. The world is full of negativity, and it sucks. But every once in a while, maybe not all day, every day, but every once in a while, we're going to have to, man up and think about the negativity so that we can address it, so that we can create long-term systemic solutions to eliminate this negativity. We won't have to think about it once we've eliminated it, which, of course, I know is challenging to do, but someone's got to do it. I don't know. I guess if you want to sleep good at night, knowing that you're ignoring it for your own emotional cope, then God bless. For me, I sleep better knowing that I, tried my best. I yelled at Mackenzie Scott, and she read my article. So I tried. And I mean, I didn't accomplish my ultimate goal, which was to change her mind. I did write a subsequent article. Maybe she'll read that. Maybe I can still persuade her. Who knows? Probably not, right? But I tried. And I got a billionaire to read my fucking article. So, you know, again, I'm not changing the world, but I'm trying. The point is to try. Anyway. Well, I guess, I don't know, she is trying, but in a very whimsical and goofy way. That's the thing, is that we get back to, you if you only think about things that make you feel good, you have a warped perception of reality. It is what it is. To begin to imagine how much more there must be, I'm going to have a stroke, dude. Just consider how many people take time out of their income-producing activities every day to listen with compassion or to speak up for someone. Man. Dude, you're a billionaire, motherfucker. Okay? Look, if I'm working at Starbucks and I'm making $18 an hour or whatever it is, yeah, I'm gonna imagine all of the kindness in the world. I'm gonna be kind to my neighbor or whatever. If I'm a billionaire, I don't have to imagine kindness. I don't have to like, oh, I'm gonna do nice things today. I'm gonna do nice things for people. You're a billionaire, right? We live in an oligarchy. I'm sorry. That's the thing. Even a lot of conservatives are like, Bernie Sanders makes an interesting point. A lot of conservatives, if you frame things like corporations have too much power, corporations take advantage of their employees, right? There's all sorts of things like that. Conservatives are like, yeah. Well, you know, that's the thing. There's so much that we disagree on. The one thing that we, you know, sort of agree on is corruption in government, right? If you say, you know, politicians are corrupt, they're taking money, you know, they're stock trading, they're whatever they're doing, but they're accepting legalized bribery and giving away favors. Democrats, Republicans, they're all like, oh yeah, politicians are corrupt. You're a billionaire. You can corrupt them, you know, or something. Like, use your imagination. I don't know. It's just, if you give away all your money and then you're not a billionaire anymore because you don't want to be a billionaire because emotionally you don't identify as a billionaire. Now you've given up the tools, right? You know, money is speech. You've given away all your speech. Now you have the same amount, or, you know, still more, but, you know, the same amount of speech as everybody else. You've voluntarily forfeited your surplus of speech. That's just... Does this government, does the American government have any compassion? And here's the thing, right? I know Republicans statistically hate compassion. They hate being nice to people. Oh, tough it out. Whatever. Okay, but ask, you know, we ask a conservative, right? Do you believe the U.S. government is compassionate? They'll say no, comma, it shouldn't be, but they'll say no. We all agree, or maybe not all, but again, everybody's different. But statistically, I think the majority of us agree. The United States federal government, our government institutions are not compassionate, at least not overwhelmingly compassionate. So if you care about compassion and you are a billionaire, you should like, hey, what can I do to foster compassion in society? Does it always have to be voluntary interpersonal compassion? Yeah, that's great. We should have interpersonal compassion, but we can also probably foster more interpersonal compassion by making people less stressed, improving the quality of their lives, giving them more to share, right? You know, if you have just enough to scrape by, just enough to survive, you're less likely to share because you don't have anything to share, right? Or, you know, again, with the ice, right? You know, we need a culture of compassion, and part of that culture is created by the institutions such as governments, anyway. And the multiplier effect on the social value of every one of these forms of benevolent contribution is huge. This is hard to read. This is genuinely difficult. It's just, generosity and kindness engage the same pleasure centers in the brain as sex, food, and receiving gifts, and they improve our health and long-term happiness as well. man, you want to talk about improving our health? Stress isn't good for you. Stress will kill you. I've already made my point. It is, it is what it is. The peace-fostering byproducts of one unexpected act of kindness towards a stranger of different background or beliefs, might inspire a beneficial chain reaction that goes on for years. Might inspire a chain reaction that goes on for years. How about we guarantee healthcare to all American citizens under a Medicare for All system, which then definitionally will go on for years, unless and until, one, the U.S. federal government collapses, or two, the Medicare for All system gets repealed, which, good luck with that. Republicans have tried for years to cut Social Security. They've, up until now, I believe, largely failed. That's the thing. Insofar as Social Security has been cut, it's been very minute. I don't know that they've even cut it at all. I guess I'd have to look that up. But the point being is they want to, conservative Republican politicians want to, not Republican voters, different. The Republican politicians want to cut Social Security. They maybe want to eliminate it, but they mainly want to cut it first, right? And plus, if you cut it, you can make it ineffective, and then you can argue, well, we got to get rid of it. It's not working. But why have they largely failed? Because it's so popular. A Medicare for All system would be so popular that also would be tremendously difficult to cut. Again, it's possible it gets cut. I'd be surprised. Instead of might inspire a chain reaction that goes on for years, how about we sort of enshrine a chain reaction that goes on for years in law? Enshrine it in law. I have to finish reading this. Respect, understanding, insight, empathy, forgiveness, inspiration, all of these are meaningful contributions to others. Dude, you're a billionaire, right? Yes, your therapist should tell you to have empathy. A billionaire should not be telling you to have empathy. We should be telling the billionaire to have empathy. Triggered. Triggered the left. It is these ripple effects that make imagining the power of any of our own acts of kindness impossible. There we've discovered her justification. Whose generosity did I think of every time I made every one of those thousands of gifts I've been able to give? It was the local dentist who offered me free dental work when he saw me securing a broken tooth with denture glue in college. It was the college roommate who found me crying and acted on her urge to loan me $1,000 to keep me from having to drop out in my sophomore year. And after she saw the difference she made in my life, tuition-free college, Medicare for All, would have solved these problems. And after she saw the difference she made in my life, what was she inspired to do 20 years later? Start a company that offers loans to low-income students without a cosigner. And how quickly did I jump at the chance to be one of the people who supported her dream of supporting students just as she had once supported me. Make public colleges tuition-free, and then you don't really got to worry so much about the loans to low-income students. I mean, obviously there's books and housing, but the tuition, it's like I'm talking to a brick fucking wall. And to whom will each of the thousands of students thriving on those generosity and gratitude-powered student loans go on to give? None of us has any idea, but that's the thing, is it like, woohoo, I got this nice loan. I don't know that you necessarily contextualize that as kindness, but I don't. Oh, we're almost there. We're almost there. The potential of peaceful, non-transactional contribution has long been underestimated. Just a few more sentences. Often on the basis that it is not financially self-sustaining, or that some of its benefits are hard to track. The point of a corporation is to turn a profit. Corporations have a fiduciary responsibility under the law to produce a return on investment to shareholders. But you know what? Financially self-sustaining, the United States Postal Service loses a little bit of money, like not a huge amount, I don't think. But the Postal Service loses a bit of money, but the whole point is to provide access to rural communities that otherwise wouldn't have delivery services, or at least affordable delivery services, right? And it's maybe, obviously we live in the future now, so it's like not as dramatic, but I imagine there are horse-drawn carriages. That was a big deal, right? Like, if the Postal Service didn't serve you, get bent. So the purpose of government is to not really be financially self-sustaining, right? All the services, Postal Service, and it is just one example. They don't have to be profitable because it's government. If it's a corporation, it's going to be profitable. But what if these imagined liabilities are actually assets? I'm going to have a stroke. I'm going to have a stroke. What if these so-called weaknesses foster the strengths upon which the thriving or even survival of our civilization depends? Man, can we just have Medicare for all, please? Please? Just one Medicare for all. In and out. 20-minute adventure. This is genuinely difficult. I'm having a hard time. What if the fact that some of our organizations are vulnerable can itself be a power engine for our generosity? What if acts of service that we can feel but can't always measure expand our capacity for connection and trust? What if care, shouldn't the federal government have empathy? What if care is a way for all of us to make a difference in leading and shaping our countries? Votes are not the only way to show votes. Wait a minute. Votes are not the only way to show what we'd like to see more of in our societies. Did she misunderstand my entire fucking article? I didn't say she should vote. I said she should bribe politicians because it's legal in this country. There are many ways to influence how we move through the world and where we land. She's got... No, that's willful misunderstanding. She willfully misunderstood my article. I think it was pretty clear. I'm not reading the Hopi poem, dog. If you want to read it, go to her article. I skimmed it just to see if there was anything juicy that I was like, oh, I can use this, her own poem against her, or her own citation poem against her. Anyway, so, newest article. We'll see if she probably, there's no way she responds to this one too, right? How many times are we're gonna passive, it's like, the email turn-based combat. Mackenzie Scott and I are gonna fucking do turn-based condescending article writing combat with each other. No way she responds to this. Once again, no way she reads this, right? There was no way that I couldn't imagine that she was gonna read the first one. No way she reads the second. Anyway, so, clickbait title. I don't like this title in terms of other people, just general audience viewing my article. I don't like this title. I would have said, in terms of general audience, I would have said, Mackenzie Scott responded to my last article, she's still wrong, or something like that. I think I originally, in a draft of this article, that's what I had as the title. But I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, how do I manipulate Mackenzie Scott into reading this article? I successfully did it the first time. Let's see if we can do it again, right? What would she want to see? If I'm Mackenzie Scott, if it's like, oh, it's another article where he talks shit about me again, she might not read it. She's going to be like, okay, well, I already know what his premise is. She thinks she knows my premise. It doesn't totally seem like she gets it, but okay. I already know his premise. I get it. He's just doing it again. I'm going to ignore that, right? But if I say, Mackenzie Scott responded to my last article, did I fail? Like catnip, right? She's gonna be like, oh, he is gonna admit that he's wrong because I opened his heart and his mind with my empathy. So that's what I'm thinking. No, that's, if she's gonna read this article, that's the title. Did I fail? Was I wrong, Miss Mackenzie Scott? Or did I make a mistake? Let's see. First I have my article. This is a screenshot. Mackenzie Scott has failed. October 9th is when I published it. Just a screenshot showing my article when I published it. Then we have a screenshot of Mackenzie Scott's Medium account. And then you can see the article that she wrote responding to me October 15th, 6 days after my article. Before that, her last article was December 2022. Was that 3 years? So for 3 years, she did not publish an article. 6 days after I talk shit about her, she publishes an article. And if you read the article that she published 6 days after mine, it's not a coincidence. She read my article. She's responding to the meat my premise and the meat of my article, anyway. And then I got my tweet. Mackenzie Scott, formerly known as Bezos, published her first Medium article in 3 years. 6 days after my article suggesting her approach is wrong, her thesis, personal kindness has ripple effects, so she has no need to use her wealth to reform government corruption or social welfare programs. I just tweeted it just to talk shit. I was also excited, like, woohoo, I'm in her head. Let's extrapolate her thesis out from under her flowery language. I was sort of manic typing an article. That ends up being the tagline. So the tagline of my article sort of gives away the game that I'm going to talk shit some more. Quote, oh, this is her. To use just 1 year in the United States as an example, the total donated to U.S. charities of all kinds in 2020 was $471 billion. End quote. In this specific excerpt, her implication seems to be that U.S. charities have a massive amount of resources and therefore can do a lot of good. She rejects my criticism that charities only exist due to failures of government, and she seems to accept them as almost a natural, implicit part of society. For my part, I don't believe we should cancel charity. I believe it is ill-equipped to handle the ongoing collapse and failure of our society. I believe it is a feeble bandage on the massive, gaping hole in the side of our sinking ship. My response? Total medical debt in the U.S. is approximately $200 billion. This is debt that doesn't exist elsewhere in the civilized world. A bit less... Dude, I went crazy with the italics on this one because I'm like, didn't fucking get it. A bit less than half of the entire annual budget of all U.S. charities combined is equal to the debt that U.S. households have for being alive. A bit less than half of the entire annual budget of all U.S. charities combined is equal to the debt that U.S. households have for being alive. This was not an example I provided in my original article. I responded more closely to examples of Ms. Scott's actual giving and therefore what I perceived to be her areas of interest. So forgive me, Ms. Scott, for we each live in our own bubbles. In my bubble, in my sphere of thought, Medicare for All is obvious, but people have different perspectives. Her notion of the emotional impact of giving is not wrong. It is just whimsical and a bit misguided. Think of the relief these American families would feel if they had no medical debt. Think of the emotional impact. And my point is, it would not cost Ms. Scott the $200 billion face value to simply pay off this debt. Then the next generation of Americans would have medical debt again if she paid it off, right? It would cost her far less than $200 billion to simply bribe Congress to pass Medicare for All and end medical debt. It would only cost her, I estimate, millions, maybe dozens of millions. She would end not only the current $200 billion in medical debt, but prevent medical debt for generations. That's the thing. Instead of imagining the future ripple magical impact schizophrenically, how about let's guarantee largely, I mean, again, obviously, it could theoretically be overturned. God bless. We got to try anyway. Fucking let them try to overturn it, right? But let's largely, mostly guarantee these ripple effects. I'm talking in circles because I'm talking at a brick wall, a very, very wealthy brick wall. In writing, you are not supposed to underestimate your audience. Oh, I'm being such a dick. You are supposed to trust that they are on your level and capable of understanding you. I suppose I thought my point was more obvious than it was, but Ms. Scott might not realize how incredibly affordable it is to bribe Congress people. I use the term bribe because that is what I believe it to be both morally and ethically, and I hold the practice in derision. But it is, in fact, legal when done correctly. I am not suggesting Ms. Scott commit a crime. I am suggesting she follow the current campaign finance laws in our country to get the result she wants from the legislature. She has that power. Voters do not. Public policy has a near zero correlation to public opinion, according to more Harvard studies than I remember there being on the topic a few years ago. We do not live in a real or effective democracy, and only the rich have the ability to enact meaningful change to laws. As a supremely wealthy person who ostensibly would agree with me on policy, she is failing us by failing to act on the greatest possible avenue of change available to her. Let me give numbers on an example I did provide in my original article. Student loan debt in the U.S. totals about $1.7 trillion. Think about that for a moment. Ms. Scott wants to feel good about herself. I'm sorry, but that's part of the point, because she gave $1 billion almost to education institutions. She has touched about 0.1% of the problem. Her entire net worth currently, as of writing, is 3% of the problem. a problem that doesn't exist in many industrialized nations, although Canada, Japan, South Korea, I want to say, have significant college tuition. They probably don't have the massive debt problem that we have in America. I suppose I'd have to look that up, but they do have a very expensive tuition, sort of similar to us. Sorry, many industrialized nations. Can Miss Scott fix this problem if she's only worth a few % of the value of this problem? Yes, by using our system of legalized bribery to reform our country, to push the Congress to pass tuition-free college and to cancel student loan debt. Miss Scott should make like her starlings and fly, travel the world, and understand that even most capitalist nations aren't this bad. Become more worldly instead of perching in her same tree and believing her approach is infallible. What does Miss Scott believe? That she cannot get legislative results by legalized bribery? I'm like Joe Biden. I have a stutter. Come on, man. Give me a break. Horse-faced pony soldier? Well, that's easily proven wrong. That she cannot get legislative results by legalized bribery. That's easily proven wrong. Does she believe her approach has the greater impact as compared with mine? Judging by her ripple effect comments, yes, that is what she believes. But what will happen when she runs out of money or dies? Who will save us when Miss Scott's incredible generosity is gone? Because you know what will still be here long after the deaths of mortals? Institutions. Have you ever heard of the Nobel Prize like that, but for covering the healthcare costs of all citizens? I should have put that in italics too. At some point, Miss Scott just doesn't want to. She grew up in this system, molded by it. Her ideology is subservient to bourgeois ideology. Her approach maximizes her personal emotions, her personal feelings of her own virtue. My suggestion does not spark joy. She does not get her hands dirty with politics. So she does not get her hands dirty with politics. She thinks, ironically, her greatest impact lies in giving up her own power. The greatest flaw with charity is the idea that the most vulnerable among us should have to rely on the kindness of others, instead of having basic protections guaranteed to them as a fundamental right. All people deserve housing. Housing affordability, at a minimum, should be of great concern to our governments, if not housing guarantees. If not, then why have government at all? Housing should not be a commodity of which people are deprived, and until the personal whims of someone like Miss Scott wants to enhance her ego and public image by gifting a sparse handful to a few who have been deprived, maybe Miss Scott doesn't want the risk of federal government taking credit for expanding access to housing if she influences its tremendous resources and power to that effect. She wants to do it personally on a smaller scale, so she doesn't have to share the glory with politicians. No, the world Miss Scott seems to believe in is abhorrent to me. Quote, over 70% of Americans reported giving both labor and money to people they know, and half reported doing the same for strangers. That's well over $1 trillion worth of individual humanitarian action that we don't read about online or hear about on the nightly news. Oh, come on. To put aside the entirely delusional nature of these imaginary self-reported numbers, let me receive Miss Scott's point in the best faith possible. Let us say these imaginary numbers mean something. Boy, I guess charity has failed then, hasn't it? 53% of Americans could not afford an emergency $1,000 expense. In 2024, homelessness reached the highest level since reporting on this data started. Life expectancy is lower here than in much of the industrialized world. Cuba has a comparable life expectancy. I mean, am I going to be able to persuade Miss Scott that this country is completely failing if she doesn't already get it? She lives in a bubble. Everyone she hangs out with is rich. Life is unicorns and rainbows. She does not grasp, I imagine, the increasing struggle and stress and terror among the working class. Greater now than in recent memory. Everything we know is collapsing, running out, breaking, getting weaker. This is a problem requiring an aggressive, systemic solution. And who knows, maybe kindness will dramatically increase through ripple effects if we make this country one which does not torture the working people who make it run. Maybe the punitive, cruel, barbaric capitalist hellscape in which we live kills kindness far more. Maybe people who do not give to one another or help nearly as much when they are simply struggling to survive themselves. Maybe people need to have something in their lives to give, some amount of time, some amount of resources, which we increasingly lack. The dentist shouldn't have to give you free dental work Mackenzie, because dental care should be covered by a Medicare for all healthcare system. For fuck's sake! Once again, if human beings need to scrape together money they don't have to be able to keep their teeth, why did we create human civilization at all? Looks at the camera lens this time instead of the viewfinder. Why do we have society and taxes if we don't use it to keep people alive, healthy, and fed? Miss Scott looked at this complete failure of this country, and her response was that we need to be nicer to each other? We need to find a good friend to pay for our dental care? No. We don't have to accept the world the way it is. We don't have to accept lack of health care or education or housing as a given, an immovable constant of our world. We should be pissed, and we should try to change these entire premises. We don't have to accept the premise, Mackenzie. Your next article should write of the beautiful fur of gophers because you're blind. I don't know, gophers I think have limited vision. I'm being a dick. You are the same as other billionaires. You are! You don't even realize you're obsessing over your own feelings because they are more important to you than change. You have to believe that your approach has the greater impact. You have to. Because if you admitted to yourself that you are wasting your life and resources for short-term, piecemeal gestures instead of real solutions, you would be emotionally destroyed. That's what they are, Mackenzie. They are gestures. And a gesture can mean a lot to a person. It can. It can change a person's life. But it doesn't change the world. Do you want to change the world, or do you want to run a Mackenzie is a sweetheart propaganda campaign disguised as a charity? Instead of ad buys, you're buying testimonials. I don't know, anyway, I don't make any money off these videos. I had monetization 2 different times, and I lost it 2 different times. So, yeah, no, feel free to click like and subscribe. I won't make a fucking nickel. And, but don't click subscribe too much, because obviously this is, I'm arguing with Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, so we don't, you know, he's gonna be jealous. If you do a bunch of subscribing, then an Amazon drone is gonna come to my house and explode me. So like, subscribe in moderation, right? Do a tasteful subscribe, but nothing flashy or gaudy. Anyway.
Yeah, man. There it is. So this is super crazy day. That right there is Balin Mania, and we are gonna do something really stupid today. This is a terrible idea. Balin might die. It's making me uncomfortable. Go, Balin!
You riding this?
What the fuck is happening?
Balin said not to talk crap about this camera. It's a piece of shit.
This is so unbelievably sketchy. Why would you put me through this, you jerk?
That's the power of really old engineering.
It'd be nice if it didn't kill me. It's not required.
I felt it fucking pop.
Make a wish, everyone. Make a wish. Not okay. You went too far. This guy, man. This guy.